of this thing called movement. And I had the pleasure of meeting Ara for the first time, was it about a month ago now?
Yeah, like a month ago, totally randomly.
Yeah, it's actually like another one of those really fun social media connections, except it was a member of the gym you manage, this rock climbing
Correct.
gym, which we're going to talk about today, who contacted me, asked if I was available for workshops, if I'd be willing to do something with you guys, and put you in touch with me. And it's just been like a very quickly growing friendship. I'm so excited to have you on here today.
Definitely, yeah, I'm excited to be here. Yeah, it was Laura, excuse me, I can't remember your last name off the top of my head. But Laura is a member. I work at Beta Climbing and Fitness in Stamford, Connecticut. It's a new rock climbing facility that opened up there. And one of our members, because I coach the team, the competitive team there, and I've been introducing a lot of animal flow into our practices because I think it's really great. Movement work, obviously, you know, I don't have to sell you on animal flow. And particularly for climbing training, it's great antagonistic movement training because they're pulling all the time, and they're really strong in that sense. But as soon as you ask them to do any kind of pushing, they freak out.
Collapse.
Yeah, and so she mentioned animal flow to the front desk, and they were like, "Oh, Dr. Ara," and I'm not like certified or anything. I just look at Instagram of people like her and learn from them and copy what they do. And I've actually copied when we did our little flow together at the gym.
Yeah.
I took the beast position thing that you did, pressing into the ground and engaging your core, and it's destroying them. It's great.
It's so much fun.
And Laura, thank you so much, just reached out to Marie and then connected us, and I thought that they were good friends, that she had known forever.
Nope.
She just like up and did my job for me.
So yeah, big thanks to Laura.
Thanks,
It wouldn't have been possible without her. So why don't you go ahead and actually give us a quick little introduction about yourself. I know we just covered little bits and pieces of that, but who you are, what you do, and
For sure. My name is Ara Morton, and I am a manager at Beta Climbing Fitness in Stamford, Connecticut. I am a climber of 12 years, the programs and events coordinator more specifically there, so I'm in charge of things like our after-school program, our adult classes, birthday parties, and events and stuff like that, member events, and I don't know, we all do a lot. I also coach the team there, it's a kind of a small team of managers just making sure the whole place runs and functions. We've only been open for about 5 months now, so it's a pretty new thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I come from a theater background, like I said, and discovered climbing when I was 18 years old. A friend of mine just, suggested that we go to a climbing gym at Boston University because he knew that I was a real gym rat and loved to work out and loved playing sports and was always I danced in high school, I fenced, and I just always did besides doing theater, anything that was movement related. I've always drumming, music.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in anything physical. And
if you can actually take us through that journey, from your childhood, what
my
were
life
those
story.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
well, like the trajectory that movement has taken you throughout your life, and what inspired you and why, and some of the deeper connecting elements as opposed to just oh, this is what I did, but the how and the why behind it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty large question. I guess the simple answer, the shorter answer, which we can dig into as much as you want, is, like I said, I've always been attracted to anything that was physical. It's just I guess, in my DNA. And it started out as a kid just being very active, playing sports, soccer, baseball, lacrosse, wrestling, hockey, everything, basketball, and music. I was really into music as a kid and still am. I play guitar at home for my daughter for the most part now. That's really what my music career is limited to at this point. Not limited, but because
that's your audience.
It's a pretty nice thing to do, yeah. But drumming particularly, I think, because it's just so full body and so physical. Cut to, like I said, when I was 18 years old. Oh, and of course theater being a very physical activity, live theater, which I went to school for. And we did a ton of movement work in terms of Alexander technique and dance courses, and those are the things that I really, really loved and connected with. Particularly Alexander technique just opened up so many things for me in terms of my understanding of myself and my body and how to use it and how to heal it. and while I was in school, a good friend of mine, Hardy Winburn, who I do remember the last name of, brother from another mother, said let's go climbing. He's from Arkansas, and he had been doing it with his friends over the summer outside in some crags down there. And as soon as I hopped on the wall, it was like all of those, like everything that I love about movement and being physical, and like the freedom and the difficulty, and it's like it clicked instantly. That was 12 years ago. I'm 30 now, and I haven't stopped climbing since. And through a series of channels and doorways, and as life happens, now I am managing a rock climbing gym and coaching a fabulous group of 12 competitive athletes, and climbing is my everyday. And I'm also a New York State licensed guide, so I go outside as much as possible, and it's a beautiful journey. It's wonderful. Climbing is something you can do your whole life. You can always have with you. You don't have to stop doing it because you aged out of an organization in high school or college or whatever.
No, that was a great answer.
Cool.
There are a few things in there that I'd love to unpack a little bit. So, Alexander technique. I've never worked with it personally, but I always hear so much about it because it is so prolific in the theater community.
Yeah.
And it seems to be a really potent part of your own experience. So, do you mind describing what that technique looks like, what it involves, and what aspects of it actually opened up your awareness of yourself, like you were describing?
That's really also a huge question, and that's why I like the conversation we've had so far, because you're not afraid to ask big questions, and those are fun things to talk about. Alexander technique is kind of a movement theory. In a way, it's very hard to describe what it looks like because it looks different depending on who does it. Everybody is going to have a different experience, and that's really what it's based in. Really a knowledge of self and kind of understanding the physical habits, physical, emotional, psychological habits, and how those things are connected in our body and how they exist in our body, and how we can become more aware of those habits that we've built in over years and years of socialization and physical experiences and mental, psychological experiences, positive and negative, that kind of create who we are as human beings and how we exist, or like at least how we as human beings exist physically in the world, individually. So it is different for everybody, and I connected to it through, and I should say, people in theater are often attracted to the study of Alexander technique because, simply put, I guess, like in order to inhabit a character fully and completely and to understand the physicality of a character, you first have to understand as specifically as possible your own physicality so you can make a choice. So the choice isn't made for you, which is a habit that you build up, but you're able to make a choice. And I think that that is what really got me going on Alexander technique, it is a physical realm, like you're dealing with the world through your body, and kind of in Alexander technique we talk about kind of like a 50-50 awareness, internal and external, so relating those two awarenesses. And I find, in my discovery of climbing while I was studying theater in Alexander technique, and I was lucky enough to go to Boston University to their theater program where we studied Alexander technique for 4 years, which was fantastic. Most conservatory programs, you study maybe a couple semesters or a year or so. And because I fell so deeply in love with that work, I was really happy to be able to spend a good amount of time with trained Alexander professionals. And I discovered climbing the beginning of my sophomore year, and I immediately integrated all those ideas and thoughts and experiences into how I was understanding climbing movement, which is like, it just boils down to efficient movement and efficient ergonomic movement. And as you start to climb more and more difficult terrain and you start going outside, which immediately becomes more difficult physically and emotionally, the understanding of like what are the most efficient ways to move my body becomes the most important thing in terms of sending or falling, that technique. And the only way to do that is to like have an awareness and be able to make a choice and say, this position feels uncomfortable. I'm going to have to subtly shift my hips, drop down a little bit, or just breathe and relax and not be holding so much tension.
Right.
Is
my big lesson.
Right, and that's like, and you know, these are life things that, you know, just relax. Maybe you need to adjust your perspective and take a breath, right? Those are things we say to like get through difficult moments in life, and that's what I connected to with climbing immediately, is those lessons are built into every move when you're climbing. It's kind of these short little vignettes of like, you know, overcoming something, which is what we're always doing in life, on a bouldering problem or a long multi-pitch route, you know.
Well, it's so interesting that the way you described Alexander technique from the get-go is like, well, it doesn't look the same for anybody. Like, it's going to look different in everybody. And I think this is one of the biggest things that's missing in like contemporary fitness and exercise norms. And I understand like where the disconnect comes, because when you're working in traditional like workout scenarios, like form is important, integrity is important, but we seem to be missing out on the idea that every body is unique. Right, and so finding the best like form and integrity for your structure is going to be unique. And having an awareness of your body for how it exists in itself is so fundamental, and we're missing that. And that was like one of our first few conversations together when we met, was talking about my work with intuitive movement, how it's really just about bringing that awareness in, bringing that comfort of finding like how your body wants to move intuitively and give it more leeway to develop and shape that, because then you can actually have versatility when it comes to problem solving, like, you know, while climbing, or whether it is doing stuff in life, or even organizing yourself around a barbell. I mean, like these principles connect to everything, and this awareness of self is something that comes up a lot in these conversations around movement. But it's just one of like the quickest things we get back when we invest our time in movement, and we invest our willingness to like really connect with it, and on a authentic and individual level.
Yeah, I mean, how can you have any awareness, or how can you make a choice about how you move if you are moving from a place of ignorance, right? If you're unaware, if you don't have awareness of how your body works as an individual, you can't just compare yourself to somebody else and say, that's what I want it to look like, and I'm going to force myself into this position to do it like, you know, do it like this, or, you know, stack a barbell this way, or, you know, do any kind of climbing move a certain way. Even though we do have ideas of what that form, like what the most ergonomic way to do a certain thing is, everyone has a different way to get to their ideal position or posture. And yeah, that's like a very physical way of looking at it, but you can expand that to the emotional spaces of your life, and you know, we all want to be happy, right? But everyone has a different way of getting there. So I do think that a lot of people tend to compare themselves in their own physical journeys, whether it's what you look like, what you're able to do, as opposed to embracing and appreciating what it is that you do well, and how you move, and what your body is capable of. And then also having the understanding of what you're not capable of. And those are the things that, you know, if you're trying to reach a goal, that you might want to work on. But how can you be aware of those things if you don't have the awareness in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I remember actually going through like a very intensive coaching program back when I worked at Equinox that was about shifting the way you related to clients, as opposed to telling them what to do, like actually figuring out the underlying desire that was underneath the goal. Because usually for most people, when they set a goal, it's not about the goal itself. The goal is an externalized projection of what they think is going to bring them a feeling. And that's how most people are operating in relationship to their bodies. It's like, well, if I can lift this much weight, then I'll be strong. And if that means I'm strong, then I will feel confident and strong in my body. Then I'll feel fit. Or if I lose this amount of weight and get this kind of definition in my six pack, that will mean I'm, you know, fit and like good looking. But what they're really looking for is to feel confident and happy within themselves. And it was so interesting for me to debunk that idea of like, oh, that's just like an externalization of a thought that will bring a feeling, possibly.
Right.
But what if I just tapped into trying to find a way to find that feeling right away, rather than plaster somebody else's idea of what's going to bring me that feeling.
I love that you talk about the feeling of it as opposed to what you think it should look like, or a one-size-fits-all solution for whatever goal you have, that attainable or non-attainable, right? And that's something we talk about all the time in climbing, is feeling yourself on the wall. Again, having that like 50-50 awareness, and being able to make those micro adjustments, even just a breath, because one person might do a move one way and it might be very easy for them because they have particularly strong legs or long legs, or are like 110 pounds and have extremely strong fingers, or have, however your body is made up. And also maybe they're just mentally there that day. I don't know, like there's a million things that go into it. So understanding where you are on any given day in your body and having that sense of awareness, I think is crucial, like you said, climbing or non-climbing. And people often think that there is a one-size-fits-all solution to training, to diet, to reach a goal, even if that's not something that necessarily works for their body. You want to get strong, you want to lift a certain amount of weight. Maybe 450-pound squat isn't going to make you stronger. Maybe it's just going to injure you because you weigh like 185 pounds. Me, I weigh 175 pounds. I don't really want to squat 450, but there are people that certainly do, and that's okay. But it's not necessarily the healthiest thing to do, in my opinion. And it's only one avenue of feeling like healthy and strong and confident.
Well, and it's also interesting when you look at how different movement modalities will elicit different expectations.
Sure.
And I touched on this last time we spoke, so I'm going to expand on it again for the listeners. How I think climbing by nature seems to be an arena where there really aren't specific expectations around results, right? I mean, there is a general feeling like, being able to get to like the next level of a climb, like the more difficult problem solving that you can do when you're scaling a wall. But aside from that, like, it isn't as specific and regimented as other results can be in other movement modalities.
Sure.
Which is so fascinating because I think it just allows a lot more freedom in the practice to make your own decisions, to make your own micro adjustments and maneuvers, and then it also elicits a sense of playfulness in the process of getting yourself there, right? Like, because like you said, some days you're just on and then some days you're not, but you're still willing to put in time no matter what the outcome is on a given day.
Absolutely. It's so funny, I was just thinking, we've spoken about so many things and the conversation's gone on for like 10 or 15 minutes now. We barely touched on climbing. I love it though, talking about the philosophy of movement, and that's really, really cool. And exercise. Alexander technique. I haven't really talked about Alexander technique in a long time. So I'm happy to do that. Climbing, what I like to say about climbing, and one reason why I think it is so appealing to so many people, is that no matter if you're an absolute beginner climbing 5'8", V0, climbers will know what I'm talking about. If not, you can research climbing grade systems. Or if you're climbing like at an expert professional level, you can work just as hard and dig just as deep. And the scale is always sliding. No matter what you accomplish, there's always something more. Alex Honnold, Chris Sharma, guys that are extremely strong, Sasha DeJulian, these like pro climbers, they're all looking for the next send and the harder send. Ashima, those are, I don't know, some climber names people might recognize. They're all chasing their next climbing dream, just like someone who picked up climbing 5 months ago and is doing it as a way to begin an exercise routine inside, is looking for their next send and their next mountain to conquer, if you will. And both of those people can put in just as much work and effort and gain just as much from that victory or that send as the next. And so for that reason, it's a never-ending journey that you can engage with at any time. And the other thing that I love that you said is that it's playful. For me, I think one of the big reasons I connected with climbing in the first place is because I'm a child at heart. I am just a super child, which is why I was into theater, I think. That's why they call it a play, because you just play, you know, you just interact and have fun. And that's where like the beauty comes from. And same with climbing, as serious as we can take it as like athletes and competitors. At the end of the day, it's just an extremely fun activity that we are built to do. You know, babies climb instinctually. We're always looking to move our bodies in that way. You know, if you believe in evolution, which I feel like most of you probably do, we are descendants of apes. Obviously, climbing is in our DNA. It's how our bodies work. So, you know, I think that's one reason why kids connect to it, and one reason why I connect to it, and many adults connect to it, because it kind of gives you that feeling again of when you were a kid, of being really, really excited about something. And one thing I would actually argue against what you said is that it's not as easy to track progress with climbing, because yes, it is like a very organic thing to do, and climbing grades are fairly subjective, but there's like very much a one-to-one correlation of I could do that or I couldn't do that last week, and I can do that now. And even if grades are subjective, sure, if you go gym to gym or even outside, crag to crag, the people that are like putting up these climbs and giving them certain grades, they get adjusted, you know, they go up, they go down. People disagree, oh, it's a V5, oh, it's a V6, I don't know, whatever. Like, those things are subjective, but it's very easy to like go, if you're going to a climbing gym regularly and you can't do this one climb because of this one move, and you work at it and you work at it, and then one day you come in and you just feel it and you hit it, and then you realize I can do that, and you realize maybe the adjustment that you made, maybe you're just getting stronger, whatever the case is, wherever you are in your journey, you know, I couldn't do that, and now I can do this.
I'll clarify what I meant by that, because I agree with you there. It was actually not that you can't like see your progress, rather that, you know, there isn't one specific outcome that equals progress. Right? Like being able to solve the problem and being able to figure out how to make that move for yourself is the element of progress, but it isn't you have to do it this way. Right?
Absolutely.
There's like all those individual variations, whereas when most people externalize their sense of accomplishment and progress into X, Y, or Z, right? Like, especially when it's aesthetically driven around the body itself rather than what you are doing with your body. And what makes climbing so beautiful to me, especially having experienced it with someone like you, who's like so knowledgeable.
She picked it up pretty quick.
I feel like I could be better. But it was just so fascinating for me to already observe, even in that moment, how much openness and versatility were available to being able to solve those problems. And that was what I was touching on, like that it's a process that really allows you to be individual. In fact, it encourages it.
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry I misunderstood.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Because I absolutely agree. It's process, not product oriented in general. And again, that's why I love it. And that goes back to the idea of no matter who you are in your climbing journey, there's always the next thing. There's always more to learn. And that's, I think, what attracts a lot of people to the idea of having this never-ending process that they can spend their whole lives doing and always have questions about. And never feel like you're finished, right? There's always a hunger. It always leaves you wanting something more and appreciating what you did and like the journey that you're on. And I think people need that in their lives, honestly. Like, I think nowadays people are very sucked into work life and phones and devices, and climbing is very much something that takes you away from that and puts you in your body and kind of wakes you up, if it's, you know, working on accomplishing something, or literally just getting over fear of heights. And also engaging in a community. Climbing is all about community. That's really, I think, the driving force behind what excites people about climbing, is that not only do you engage physically, intellectually, but socially when you do this sport. Inevitably, you walk into a gym and people are sitting around talking, you know, sharing data, sharing tips on like information about routes, and, you know, helping each other reach their goals and send the project or whatever. And so, yes, go ahead.
1 second. Alright, I think it's, no, don't do that. That's okay. I just wanted to make sure it's still recording, so you can track your progress and your goals.
Yes. Well, right. So, like, you know, you always find people, that's a huge dynamic in a climbing gym, is the social element of it, which is why, like, at Beta, my job as a program and events coordinator is to promote as many social events and member things and things to engage our community socially and get each other talking, and to build that spirit of family and community, because that's a huge reason why people get into climbing in the first place, which you don't necessarily see at like a traditional fitness facility. Also why I think people were getting into things like CrossFit and, like, you know, these various boot camp classes, because you're with the same people, you make friends, you meet people, and I think people crave that too. These days, you know, I hear a lot of people talk about feeling isolated, and we're connected more than ever, but less connected than we've ever been. You know, how many times have we heard that?
The juxtaposition of technology.
Right, exactly. Technology, the phones are killing us. But, and even if they are, right, we are definitely, I think people in general are looking for ways to reconnect physically with themselves and with other human beings, and climbing is like such an amazing way to do that, and also get a great workout, and people look for that as well. And then from there, it's like you can go on this amazing life's journey. I never expected climbing to give me what it's given me, in terms of like a stable career and the friends that I've known and the experiences that I've had, and the things that I've learned and done, and goals and ambitions, and you know, a travel checklist, you know, things that are really enriching to my life on more than just like a physical level or a fitness level. You know, although, and it gives me that too. It gives me fitness and a reason to want to be fit, and not just like, I want to look good in a bathing suit or whatever. Like, it's not just about that. It's you know, sure, everybody wants to look good in a bathing suit, but like, it's
don't knock it.
Right, don't knock it. That's a good goal too. But that can be less than motivating sometimes in December in New York. But having, like, I've always found that having a climbing goal pushes you to train, because you're really emotionally invested in being able to do this thing, because of all the reasons I stated, it meaning a lot to you, you know?
Well, and I love what you're talking about with, like, it's always ever expanding. Like, there's no final frontier with this stuff. And,
Literally
you know, when I think about this has been a key point for me to not only observe in my movement practices, but also to pull into my life when it comes to, like, relationships or career and community and friendships, is to understand it's not about getting something to meet an end, but like the journey of watching that goal or that experience be realized, and then being ready for the next one. I mean, actually, speaking of climbing and mountains and traveling, one of the guests I had on this podcast a little while back was Tony Testa. He's a very famous choreographer and director in the dance world, and also producer now. And he explained the trajectory of his career using a metaphor with climbing mountain tops, and then like the second, and then the second he gets to the top, like, you know, he's succeeded, then like literally immediately he sees the next one.
Looks off into the distance.
Yep, and then he makes that journey with all of its pitfalls, and he even said that at the end of the day, the journeys that are the easiest are some of the least satisfying. And as frustrating as it is to be dealing with the obstacles along the way, like, there's something that deepens the experience of actually getting there when you've had to work through it.
Definitely.
And
Yes.
it's like such an important parallel to life, though, to instead of like resisting those obstacles, or instead of like being mad that you aren't where you want to be yet, to like appreciate, you know, that evolution that's taking place, and then to also be totally okay with the fact that once you get there, you're gonna want the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's part of it. That's part of like our expansion as human beings. Like we're here to experience a lot of stuff and to like really embrace all of it. And climbing is just, as you were talking, I couldn't help but think like, oh, so many parallels to life.
Right, of course.
You know, that's
like,
how I see things.
Like I keep saying, that's I think what attracts me and many others to the sport is that there is always that next mountain to climb, literally and metaphorically. You know, if you're someone who's started climbing in the gym, just literally getting outside and climbing real rock is a huge accomplishment, and then taking that journey, that's a whole nother world. Literally, now you have a whole world of climbing that's opened up to you. That is, yet again, another emotional, physical experience and intellectual experience. One of the most gratifying things for me as a climber has been, and was, getting my guide license for New York State, because I'd been climbing outside a lot in my 12 years of climbing, mostly on the Northeast, like in Massachusetts and in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. But learning the anchors, learning anchor building, learning rescue techniques, rope management, haul systems, stuff like that. Just like really, you know, I geeked out on it. It was so much fun, and it made me realize yet again, there are so many things to learn in this huge world that kind of never stops. And it's not just physical, you know, you can absolutely engage, I mean, even off the wall, you can engage your mind in problem solving related to climbing. And there are just so many things that it has to offer. And now I'm not suggesting everybody go off and make their lives about climbing like I have, but climbing kind of made itself a huge part of my life. And that's, you know, everybody has their own journey, but I feel very lucky to have that be the case, that I kind of, and I thank you, Hardy Winburn. It all goes back to literally this one moment. We were moving into an apartment together, sophomore year of college, and he was this like skinny hippie guy, and he comes into my room with his shirt off, and he goes, "Not such a skinny hippie anymore, huh?" And I said, "Wow, yeah, you have biceps now. That's very impressive. What have you been doing all summer?" And he goes, "I've been climbing."
Oh wow.
Rock climbing, cool. Yeah, and that was 12 years ago, right? September 12 years ago. And it's afforded me a really cool life's journey and a craft and something that I know I can always do and have with me, even if it's not my career, which, you know, in kind of making this transition from theater and acting to climbing, as much as I love that world of theater and collaboration, you need a lot of people to do it.
Yeah.
And it can be hard if, you know, you don't have those opportunities to make those opportunities for yourself. And climbing, it's like literally you can climb anything you want.
Well, it sounds like you have the same like collaboration and community and like you said, expanded opportunity, because the guidelines or sort of the parameters that frame climbing are very different than those that frame being in theater or television or movies, and like where you don't necessarily have the money and like the budgets and like all that
or even
stuff.
Besides money and budget, just like coordinating with other people's schedules. I mean, even if like as a writer, if you write something, you still need a group of people to bring it to life, even if you're just sitting around a coffee table, which again is an amazing thing to do, to work with a group of people. And climbing certainly involves a lot of communication and working together to literally keep each other alive. Depending on the type of climbing you're doing, it involves a great amount of trust, but it's in essence, climbing is just like our own natural movement. And like I said, you can climb anywhere. You can build, or you can go outside in Brooklyn right now and just climb up the buildings if you really wanted to. People did it. People have done it.
It's called parkour.
It's called parkour, exactly. That's a whole other world I have no idea about. I don't know how people. I like taking calculated risks as a climber. No, I'm not a free soloer.
Well,
I'm not a
Well, I think to put some
parkour
parkour, it's
player.
like similar to getting like your, what is that, your climbing license? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Like you actually have to like have like gone through classes and like learn the
Oh, for
technique.
sure.
I mean, because it's pretty involved. I remember being like 13 and watching parkour videos and like trying to run up walls like with my friends, like we're so dorky. But then like the first few times you try and do stuff like that, you start to have like so much humility for like what people are actually doing on some of these videos.
For
It's
sure.
so
Oh my
intense.
gosh, yeah, I mean, this is such a tangent. Watching videos of guys and girls running on like rooftops with 300-foot drops and
Oh my
left and
god,
right, whatever.
it's so crazy.
It's really crazy. But, you know, as a climber, I love feeling scared and taking calculated risk, but
Well, I think it's a different type, right? If you put as much time into parkour or free running as you know you did in climbing,
I still wouldn't do it. Much respect to you who do. I still wouldn't do it. I got a kid. I'm trying to stay alive.
I hear you.
But you know what's funny? Like parkour and Ninja Warrior
Mhm.
has brought. You know, I work a lot with kids in climbing. That's a big part of my job, and that's something that I love to do. Again, like I'm a big kid. I love playing games. I love teaching kids how to climb and like seeing those aha moments when they are figuring out how to use their bodies to climb. And there are so many kids that are coming into the sport because their parents are like, oh, it's a climbing gym? Do you guys do like Ninja Warrior? My kid loves Ninja Warrior. My kid loves these parkour videos on YouTube. Do you do stuff like that? And I say, no, it's something very different, but it sounds like they'll really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, climbing is kind of growing more and more mainstream for reasons like that, and more climbing gyms opening up, so people are kind of discovering it as an activity that will engage their kids and make them exhausted when they come home and give them something to do that's fun, like I keep saying, and like social and engages their mind. And climbing is going to be in the Olympics in 2020, all three disciplines of climbing: speed climbing, rope climbing, lead climbing, and
So
bouldering,
soon.
which is pretty soon. Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool to see that on the world stage, and I think it's just going to explode after
my
that.
gosh,
People
I
are going to
can't
be like,
wait.
what is that? I want to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've only climbed 4 or 5 times, but every time it's always just been so much fun.
It's super fun. And you can attest to the last time when we climbed together, how those adjustments in terms of thinking, efficiency, not like climbing smarter, not harder.
Yeah, it was
makes
so
it a different activity
totally.
altogether.
It was so interesting to watch myself there because I could feel myself externalizing my progress. Like we were talking about earlier, like that immediately happens, and especially this happens to me a lot as somebody who is a fitness professional. Like I'm supposed to be advanced at everything when I start, and so if I'm falling short, it's like this panic mode. The same fight or flight that would happen if a cheetah was chasing me happens when I'm climbing the wall because Ara is spotting me, and I need to like show him.
I really hope that you would be much more distressed if a cheetah was chasing you. She was cool, calm, collected.
No, I'm like drawing the comparison because like I know I was sensing that level of like anxiety, and I could tell how it was taking me out of my capacity to just sort of like find my own intuition in that process, right? It's just
and you're
like
using your body in a new way, so
Yeah.
of course there's going to be somewhat of a learning curve. But as I expected and suspected, as soon as you got on the wall, you were able to digest the suggestions that I was making in terms of like body positioning and working your feet through first, and not like doing pull-ups or moving with like a great amount of muscularity as opposed to just like moving with efficiency. And a lot of people, you know, when I teach beginner movement classes, I talk about all these things very specifically. I talk about how to use your feet, how to support your movement with your lower body, how to shift your weight through your hips, how to hang from your arms and use your skeletal structure as opposed to like pulling up and using your biceps and, you know, all of those relatively small muscle groups that will get exhausted pretty quickly if you're not moving with efficiency. And some people get it. It drops in and you can see them like take the suggestion and make the adjustment immediately. And some people, and I always, you know, there's no judgment whatsoever. It's like riding a bike. You can tell a kid how to ride a bike and how it should feel, like we were saying before, what the feeling of being centered and weighted with momentum is like. But some people may take longer than others for that to drop in and click physically, and then say, oh, that's what he was talking about. And climbing is the same way. You were able to make those adjustments very quickly because you have that awareness of your body and a good sense of movement in general. And it's always so interesting seeing that aha moment and that shift when all of a sudden you go from looking like you're freaking out on the wall to looking like a powerful, strong climber moving with confidence.
Yeah.
And if you watch any professional climber, when you watched climbing in the Olympics in 2020, or if you watch like competition at any high level, what you'll notice is that the really strong climbers make what seems like it should be impossible look very, very easy. And although there is a great amount of strength training involved in climbing, and like certainly climbing at that level, conditioning your body to be able to take a certain amount of work and do certain things and be able to pull hard enough to support your own body weight and much more. At the end of the day, these climbers are finding maximum efficiency, which makes it look like a dance, or make it flow and make it look effortless, which is the idea. Climbers are lazy, right? We want to do the least amount of work possible at any given time.
Well, that's just like evolutionary principles.
Right, exactly. Like, but it literally is like also good climbing technique.
Yeah, because if you want to go like further and like more complex than ever before, you got to be saving your resources, and you have to.
Yeah, the simple analogy I use is like if you're gonna hang from a bar in a full locked off pull-up position, is that easier or harder than hanging with your arms straight? And in which position can you hang longer? Obviously with your arms straight, because you have your joints and your skeleton and your sinew holding you together, not allowing you to come off of the bar. Whereas here you're locked off and you're really employing mostly small muscle groups like your biceps and your lats, which compared to like your legs, which support you all day long when you're on the wall, will exhaust themselves pretty quickly. So you'll burn out and fall before you get to the end of the climb. And if the whole idea behind climbing is let's not fall, which is obviously I always say there is no climbing without falling. Everybody falls, right? Then you need, like you said, you need to save the gas in that tank. And that's where efficient movement comes in, and climbing technique, and talk forever about that.
All that good stuff.
All that good stuff.
Well, so now that we've dug into climbing, I'm actually curious on one of your unique perspectives with one of my favorite questions, which is, how would you define movement?
That is a really good question.
And it can be a big answer outside of physical movement, right? Because movement's a huge concept. That's really what this podcast is about. You know
what? I'm going to be totally honest with you, and I cheated a little bit because I listened to a couple of your episodes, and I kind of anticipated this question. And as soon as I heard you ask some of your other interviewees, I like immediately got a little anxious. I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a big question. I was like, what do I say? So being totally honest and upfront about that, this is so corny and cheesy, but I really think movement is everything. It's life, it's energy, it's what the universe is like founded upon, expansion and vibration, sound. We can't experience the world without movement. Vibration and sound in terms of touch, obviously. Kinesthetically, like moving through the world and feeling the wind and knowing like, oh, there's ground underneath me and there's a building to my right, and I can hear the vibration of the sound from the cars and the light hitting my eyes, right? The photons hitting my eyes. It's like, and if matter and molecules are literally made of energy, which is vibration, then literally movement is everything. It's the universe, and that's such a...
No, but I mean, I'm right there with you. I was actually talking to someone about this yesterday. We were talking about dancing.
I would make fun of myself for giving that answer, by the way. So, Annie, feel free to drag me for that corny ass answer.
But no, but the thing is, a lot of these corny answers, they're corny because people say them a lot, but it doesn't mean they're any less true. And I actually, whenever I move, I I literally can see or feel movement as a way that I'm moving energy. I think of movement as like this incredible technology to move energy, not just like within my body, but with the world around me, with like my electrochemical and like energy in my body, with my emotional energy in my body or in myself. Like it is literally creating shift.
Yeah.
It is creating shift on multiple scales, on multiple levels, all the time.
Right.
Every time I'm engaging with it, whether it's consciously or subconsciously or unconsciously, like whatever movement I'm engaging with is shifting energy.
Yes.
Period.
Absolutely.
And if the fundamental is like, if you're not moving, you're probably not alive, because like movement has to happen for your like life to evolve and to continue. So I don't find that corny at all. I loved it.
I appreciate that. And I thought you would, and I imagine that it's not the first time you've heard an answer similar to that, at least approximately that.
Well, that's what's so funny about this question. That's the question that started this podcast.
Sure.
Because I asked this on Instagram because I realized I was talking about movement all the time, and I realized I have a very different definition of what movement means, or different experiential viewpoint, but everybody else has a totally different one. So like, I'm curious, how would you define movement? And people all came back with some like really intense answers about it being connected to life. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if like we could remind ourselves of that often, through like getting to see what people's experiences were and like watching them unpack that question week by week,
I love that, and that's why I've enjoyed listening to this podcast, and I'm honored to be on it as well, because it's certainly something I think about all the time. And it's a really, like I said, I've always connected with the world in a very physical way. And I just have always had the desire to move and play, and again, that's why I love climbing, because it feels like play. It feels like, even though you're getting great exercise and it can hurt like hell and be super scary, it's like this just unbelievable sense of, I'm going to move my body in all these different crazy, weird ways, and for all the reasons that we discussed, there are a litany of advantages and byproducts of doing that are super nurturing, emotionally, physically, intellectually, and so maybe that's like everything, movement is everything is my big answer. Maybe the more specific, smaller answer for me is that movement is healing, I have, it can help you overcome injury, but I think more so for me it's been like a way that I can feel good, feel solid, feel stable, feel present and connected, all the things that we look for as human beings in our life. In a way, climbing has been like, what's the word I'm looking for, like an avenue for me to experience all those things in a very specific and distilled way, and like a way that I can engage those things that we all look for in a macrocosmic way. Like I can just do it, and I get that feeling of connectedness, and I can choose to give myself a little happiness by climbing, right? And it's rare that, everyone has a hobby, right? I think everyone should have a hobby, but not everybody does have that kind of thing that just allows them to feel good whenever they do it. And certainly not everybody is lucky enough to have that thing be what they do for a living, or like have that be their life in general, which I am so grateful for. And whenever I get stressed or, feel like overwhelmed with work, or and of course there are those struggles just like everybody has, it is really grounding to be able to come back to these thoughts and moments like this, or even just appreciating that climbing has brought me here to have this cool conversation, that being able to do something that I'm very passionate about and that I connect with in such a way is a real gift.
Well, yeah, and to basically have a main line into like the most solid sense of security and well-being and centeredness, and to know where to get it whenever you need it, and to literally just be able to connect right into it. I believe that's available to everybody if they're willing to seek out what brings that feeling.
Absolutely.
And engage with it more and more. And the more you get your bandwidth, and the more you can sort of reorient and organize towards those, what brings up that feeling for you, because it's going to be different for every person. Like, you know, for me, it's like dance and exploring movement, like freely, just for fun, like in ground-based stuff. Like for you, it's on a wall, but like, you know, it's also fun for us to be able to like exchange those and play off of one another.
Yeah, because it's all from the same place, right?
But I really feel strongly like we all have that. We just have to give ourselves permission to go there. And yeah, I love that movement is healing. It's so true, and I have not heard that answer yet. So,
really?
yeah.
Oh, nice. I was like, that's way too corny. She's for sure gotten that one all the time.
Well, no, I mean, but like again, like I said, if we're hearing it a lot, then like there's a reason.
Absolutely.
But I'm glad we got to the movement is healing. That's a really nice one.
Cool. I'm glad I could offer that. But you know, it's really funny, as you were talking just now and reflecting or kind of reiterating what I was saying in terms of finding those things that connect us to our humanity in the activities that we love to do. For me, climbing; for you, dancing and moving like an animal. It's funny, like for me, and I think a lot of climbers, like, you get that feeling of secureness and like fulfillment, but it's such a scary thing. Like, part of that is because it's so scary. Like, just as you said that, I was thinking, man, it's also very torturous. Like, you know, you put yourself, especially when you start transitioning to outdoor climbing and like climbing taller walls, multi-pitch projects and stuff like that, being really high off the ground and doing hard moves really high off the ground. Even in the gym, like just being afraid to fail and not being afraid that you're not gonna fall on a climb and all your friends are gonna laugh at you or something.
Yeah, that's scary.
Like,
I can attest.
There's a huge amount of fear in different ways, but you know, and when I teach kids in class, there's obviously a fear of heights and a fear of secureness, but overcoming those fears and just confronting those fears is healing in and of itself, I think.
Yeah.
And like those little, because in climbing there are tons of those moments strewn out all over the place, and you confront it almost every time you climb. There's a little bit of that fear, for one reason or another. But then that makes those successes in overcoming those fears even more gratifying. And so it's like you get these little bursts of endorphins when you're climbing, even just overcoming the smallest fear of like, I don't think I'm going to hit this move, you know, and then you hit it, and then you're so stoked, and like, you know, it's, oh, I didn't realize I could do that. I've learned something about myself, and I've overcome a fear, which, like, again, like, we don't have a lot of safe spaces to confront fears head on in our life. And also, another tangent that I feel like we should talk about that we haven't spoken on yet is the fear of heights is, like, obviously a very real thing in climbing, and especially new climbers. And of course, talking about fears in climbing, that's like the most obvious one. But I've never, and I'm not just saying this because I obviously love climbing, and I'm not like trying to preach the church of climbing here, but I really do think that indoor climbing and outdoor climbing, but indoor climbing maybe even more so, just because of that sense of like a safety net. Not literally, but that sense of safety is the best way to overcome a fear of heights if you want to, because it is a controlled environment in which you can face that fear in a very real and dynamic way, head on, and you can also learn to trust your body in that situation, whereas if you just go to the top of a really tall building, you don't necessarily feel in control at that moment, because
you didn't get yourself up there. Also, you took an elevator.
Right, you took an elevator most likely. So your body is not like the captain of that situation necessarily. When you're climbing, your body is the captain of that situation, and so feeling strong and feeling confident in your movement at height, if you're afraid of heights, I've seen people who literally could not go more than 5 feet up without breaking down and having massive panic attacks. One kid who I will not name in particular, I remember a couple years ago we started doing lessons, and he's was like 11 years old, 11, 12 years old at the time, maybe not even that old. And that was the case with him. Jump forward months later of us just kind of talking through what the experience he was having in his body was when those moments of panic happened, and what was he really afraid of happening, what were the consequences of him trusting the system or letting go, you're not going to hit the ground. So what are we really, like, what is the fear that we're really confronting here? Is it something that is it something real or something that we're placing on ourselves? And certainly this was a process of months, but after maybe 6 or 7 months of having those conversations and confronting that fear relentlessly week after week after week, he was fine. And now he's just a climber, and he, is more, now he's getting frustrated with not being able to pull a move or do a climb or, hit a certain grade, whatever the case may be. Then there is, and the anxiety of being in the air or being at height is not even a consideration anymore. It's just engaging in the climb itself, which is what brought him past that fear, which is now something he's able to just enjoy. And I've seen that was maybe the most drastic case I've ever seen, where someone who was literally having panic attacks is now fear-free, right? But I've seen it, I can't even count them, like probably over 100 cases of folks coming in with a fear of heights and empowering themselves to move past that, or like not allow that to create anxiety for them, or at least choose to not react negatively to that anxiety. Being able to make the choice to like feel calm and controlled it's uncanny. And so anyone looking for a way to overcome a fear of heights, find your closest climbing gym or come to Beta Climbing Fitness.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
Well, it's so interesting you mention that, because I had never thought about that, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Like, like the embodiment of like moving through your fear of heights, literally like foot by foot, move by move, like practice session by session. Right. It's interesting also the dynamic you're talking about in relationship to heading your fears and like taking them face on, and then also like being okay with failure, because that was like, I know that's what really shaped me as a mover, was my dance background, where you had people throwing movements at you that they literally had dreamed about in their head, and they were explaining verbally, and they just wanted you to do, and you had to somehow be able to figure out and do it before anybody else did, so that you would nail it and get noticed and get booked for a gig.
Right.
And this stuff was already starting when I was like 12 years old. This wasn't just like professional. So you learn very quickly to like jump into things without knowing what was going to happen. You were okay with the expectation of perhaps falling on your face or like totally biffing it, and you did sometimes.
For sure.
But what happens most of the time is this amazing thing where your body just sort of self-organizes, figures stuff out, and it like you're fine.
Right.
And you end up totally surprising yourself multiple times over. And I know, for me, that did translate into my select climbing experiences. It's also translated even in my sort of like brashness with like different strength training modalities or like body weight stuff. I'm very fearless in that way, and I know a huge part of that was because I grew up like not having the luxury of being afraid, because I wanted to dance, I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be recognized, and I was willing to do whatever it took to like put myself out there, and that included failing or facing those fears when they came up. 100%.
Failure is the greatest teacher, right? Another cliche.
But so
super
true.
Common, but super true. And that is, like I said, if relating this to climbing, falling, everybody falls all the time, and which, if falling equals failure, it's an activity that you will fail at more than you will succeed at. You will fail all the time, and you want to fail. You want to push yourself. That's how if you just climb the same things over and over, if you climb in that comfort zone that is really easy for you, that's not where the fun of climbing is. The fun of climbing is continuing to push for more and better and learning to do new types of movement, or feeling again that same feeling of I couldn't do that a week ago or 3 months ago or a year ago, but I can do that now. And now I understand how that works and how my body works, and I put in all this work that's now paying off in terms of being able to do more on the wall or like reach higher grades, whatever it is your goal is. But failure is a huge part of that. This is a conversation I have with our competitive climbing team all the time, because they are these, they're these teenage kids who have a lot of pressures, which is a whole nother conversation. I think kids are definitely overworked these days, but they have these expectations of themselves in competition that often, like, it just makes it so difficult for them to fail. And if they fall on a route in competition and they don't place or whatever, I've often thought it would be kind of a sick, cruel joke to make an Instagram page called Crying Climbers, because you see so many crying climbers at comps, and like it just climbers
you see a lot of crying dancers at competitions.
Right, exactly. It's the same thing. But like at the end of the day, dancing, climbing, all of these things that we do for fun, you have to remember that it's for fun, and you can't have fun if you're not like, part of that fun is competition with yourself and pushing yourself and like learning and growing. And the only way to learn and grow is by failing, because if you don't fail, how can you adjust? And again, this goes back to the beginning of our conversation of awareness. What kind of awareness will you have of what you can and can't do if you're doing the things that you can do and over and over again and not pushing yourself at all? So that, and again, like tying it into theater and my experience of like climbing and theater and relating those two things, yes, climbing certainly has helped me with like the audition process, and the audition process has helped me emotionally with climbing. That idea of, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to give it my all, and I am going to be who I'm going to be, and I will, and failure is inevitable at some point. If it's now, that's fine, that's cool, but I can learn something from it. And as opposed to allowing that failure to crumple me and, and allow me to just like, if that was the case, I'd be sitting in the corner like just crying. I'd be the first person on Crying Climbers. If I got upset about every failure theatrically or in climbing, right? But we do have a choice in terms of how we react to those failures, and we do have a choice to to observe those failures and observe ourselves in those failures, and as objectively as possible assess what we did, what we could have done, what we did well, what we did poorly, and what we could have done better. And those are the 3 questions we ask our climbers after every comp. We sit around the next day and we say, name one thing, and we go around each kid one at a time. What did you do well? What did you do poorly? What did you learn to take into the next comp? And those are the only 3 things that matter. It doesn't matter if you took first that day or if you did not place at all and you were like last in your category, last in the field, and you fell in every climb. Like, what are the things that you could have done to, or what are the things that you learned that you can take into the next time to maybe perform better and feel better about the day or whatever. And then like, when you come in first, it's the same questions, and not being comfortable with success, and not allowing that to let you kind of sit back on your heels, but looking for what you like, appreciating the failures even more than that, because that's the fun thing, right? Learning and growing.
One of my favorite neuroscientists who's like big on the benefits of meditation, and it really ties into how to use meditation as a tool for self-development, to like really be the best version of yourself you can be. He recommends that same sort of play-by-play for every day. Like at the end of each day, like catalog like when you were like the best version of yourself, and when did you fall from grace, as he says. Like when did you like succumb to something silly, like completely ruining your state of being and your mood, and why did it, and how, if you were presented with the same thing next time, would you react differently? And it's it's such an important tool to use for, like, to take a moment to reflect on experiences that have happened and organize yourself in
Yeah.
relationship to them.
And how to set yourself up for success in the future, you know, by being more prepared maybe, or like just reorienting the way you think about certain things to set yourself up for success. Not just like the things you can do physically better, right? We always talk about, you know, if you're finding you're constantly feeling tired when you come to practice, if you feel that, you know, you are not growing as a climber as quickly as the next person, like look at the things that you're doing and be real with yourself. Are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? Are you being kind to yourself? Are you, like, of course, like, are you training physically? Right? Are you actually like putting in effort mentally and physically? And if you can answer those questions for yourself, you know, if you do have a goal that you're trying to reach, those are the things that will allow you to focus your energy in the right places and train smarter, not harder, or, you know, climb smarter, not harder. And sometimes the answers are very obvious, and sometimes they're not so obvious, but it's different for everybody, of course.
Yeah, it's true. So I think we actually are gonna wrap things up here.
Yeah, it's been quite a long, meandering conversation.
Which is what we love.
Cool, I'm glad.
But if you can go ahead and leave us with some final thoughts or words of wisdom for the listeners too.
Oh my gosh. Words of wisdom.
Yeah. When it comes to movement, climbing, life, whatever is on your heart right now.
I am going to say what I told the kids before we went into our divisional championship competition a couple weeks ago. Have fun, enjoy your life. Make sure that is the focus, right? Do the right thing and enjoy yourself, because there's no reason, there's no point of moving or working out or, you know, killing yourself at the gym and suppressing your appetite and not eating, you know, if we're talking about fitness and movement, if you're not enjoying what you're doing. So make sure you find something you can connect to, that you can love, and that can be a part of your life. Like, make movement an enjoyable part of your life and not just something that you are hacking away at to reach that outlandish, stupid body image that you have in your head. And I think if people did that, they would generally be more fit, would generally be happier, and we'd be able to connect a little bit easier.
Yeah, well, I mean,
in the real.
It was also your experience. It was also my experience. That the second I stopped trying to look a certain way, instead, like, followed the feeling, followed the fun. You know, like the more fun I had with the things I did, like,
it's not working anymore.
Yeah, and then like people are like, well, what do you do?
Right, yeah.
And like I'm always saying, like, I walk a lot. Like, you know, I occasionally like will go into, like, you know, a gym like twice a month, and people are like, you go to the gym twice a month? Like, yeah, I mean, like, I go when it feels fun.
You know how many calories laughing burns?
I love that.
If you're laughing all the time, you don't even need to go to the gym. If you're laughing and climbing, you're going to have a six-pack. Guaranteed. 6 months.
So, you know, guys, it's time to join Ara's gym, Beta Rocks.
Shameless plug.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the
show. Oh, man, it's such a pleasure.
This is so great. So, if our listeners are interested in finding Beta Rocks, or they're interested in connecting with you directly, how can we do that?
You can go to our website, www.betarocks.com. That's BETAROCKS.com. Our information is there. You can look at our programs and check out the space and just come and climb. We do every Thursday our Beta Boulder and Brew Night, if you like drinking. Climbers love drinking beer.
They do.
That's one thing we didn't really touch on is how climbing is like has traditionally been so so anti-fitness, like it's so not with the fitness world. But that's, you know, you get a lot of fun people.
Yeah.
Just, you know, from Colorado, I'm sure you know some climbing dirtbags that have never worked out in their life, but crush it at the crag. So we climb and then drink beer every Thursday night. If those are things you like to do, you can come back.
Cool, awesome, great. Well, thank you so much, and it was such a pleasure having you.
Pleasure being here and speaking with you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. See ya.
Bye, all.